everyone. Myself, Dr. Venkatesh Karthikeyan, MD Community and Family Medicine Postgraduate from AIIMS Patna. I'm glad to see that doctors from lengths and breadths of the country has joined for today's webinar. In the past 3 months, IMA Junior Doctors Network has organized a series of webinars for the benefit of our junior doctors. We have collaborated with Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, AIIMS Delhi, IAPSM, Star Health Insurance, Max Group of Hospitals, and with many national and international faculties. We got a very good feedback from our webinars, that our webinars are useful to our young doctors, and hence we are continuing this webinar series. And now we have Kaho on board this time. We all know how much biomedical waste are produced every single day for each patient. How to manage these biomedical waste is a crucial topic, not only for professional exams and need point of view, but also in reality for providing good patient care. Understanding the significance of the topic, Indian Medical Association Junior Doctors Network, in collaboration with consortium of accredited healthcare organizations, is organizing this webinar on the topic biomedical waste management. I would like to thank Dr. Abul Hassan sir for his guidance and support, without which our webinar series is not possible. Sir is a senior pediatric surgeon from Erode, Tamil Nadu. He is the national chairman of IMA Junior Doctors Network. He is the founder of IMAM Foundation, which has served 1,150 terminally ill patients, and is running a completely free COVID care hospital and have spent more than 1.5 crores in the service of the poor. He's the pioneer of nursing home affairs too, and has a wide experience in dealing with this particular topic and pollution control also. He always stands up for the issues faced by junior doctors and continues to serve across different horizons. Sir is also contesting for the post of IMA State President-elect of Tamil Nadu. With this very short intro, I request Dr. Abul Hassan sir to give the welcome address.
Thank you, Venkatesh. Thank you all. At the outset, I welcome all the delegates of this meeting and also Speaker Dr. Jayalakshmi and the members of KAHO, my dear office bearers of JDN, of IMA, Dr. Shiv Joshi and others. This is a topic which is always closer to my heart. I can recall those days, those years in 2000, when the Supreme Court ordered closure of hospital, which were not following biomedical waste rules. At that time, I was in the position of nursing home board secretary. So I had to rush to all the hospitals and rush to the authorities to act between them and then come to a kind of a comfortable situation with the assurance that all the hospital will comply biomedical waste rules, on a particular time period. So that was a very frantic situation. I can recall how this biomedical waste were really impacting on the functioning of private hospitals. Today, in that context, I think many of you will be benefited. Still, even after 20 years of that ruling by Supreme Court, there are some areas in this particular biomedical waste disposal are not yet fully addressed. So it is a duty of the generator who are generating biomedical waste disposal waste to dispose it safely. So this particular meet will be very, very useful to all the participants. And it is a very, very important part of the hospital management today. And I hope Dr. Jayalakshmi would address all the issues pertaining to biomedical waste. And we have been conducting lots of webinars like this, thanks to Dr. Venkatesh Karthikeyan. And we will continue to do very useful seminars. And I request all the participants to have a good deliberations and get maximum benefit out of this. With this, I once again welcome all the delegates and the speaker to the webinar. And also thank Dr. Venkatesh Karthikeyan for his very encouraging words about my election also. Actually, it is an election issue. In fact, this biomedical waste, I have been promising all people, doctors, that we will definitely take all steps to ensure that the biomedical waste disposal issue would settle in for all hospitals. Over to you, Dr. Karthi. Thank you very much. Dr. Venkatesh.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Now I request KAHO President, Dr. Vijay Agarwal, sir, to share a few words with us.
Thank you, Dr. Karthikeyan and Dr. Abul Hassan. It's indeed a pleasure for KAHO that we are starting now this series with the young doctors in the country. And incidentally, just like Dr. Abul Hassan, this topic is also very close to my heart. In fact, for the, I think, record, people should know that the entire concept of the biomedical waste started from a court case, which was the B.L. Vadera versus the Union of India. And the judge was Mr. Kuldeep Singh. And you can imagine that, so that was, I think, somewhere in 1996, 97, if I'm not mistaken. So at that time, even the advisory people to the court was such that the court judgment was that every hospital must install an incinerator to take care of the medical waste. So in fact, the judgment was in the direction which was worse than the original problem. So you have no idea that what kind of a problem would have been created if every small hospital, 30 bed or 50 bed, was there to install an incinerator. And at that time, I was a chairperson of the Nursing Home Forum in Delhi, was approached by a NGO called Toxic Links, and there was Mr. Ravi Agarwal. And we filed a case in the court back to revise this judgment, which led on to that instead of incinerator, it can also be a non-incinerator technology. And eventually, the Ministry of Environment and Forest was directed to frame rules. So it was almost at that time that the entire concept of segregation of waste and how they should be kind of dealt, everything came around. And the whole concept of centralized waste management facilities started coming out of that entire period of the discussion. So somewhere by the year 2000, there was a lot more clarity about it. And definitely I can say that at that time, we played a very crucial and important role. So therefore, this topic is, of course, extremely important. I think we have moved quite a bit, considering the era at which I said even the CPCB had no idea, no concept of how to handle medical waste. So without much ado, I would like to congratulate the IMA wing for taking up this important topic. And of course, I think for KAHO, we are extremely proud to be associated with you, and we look forward to a series of our interactions with you. So thank you very much.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for the kind words and sharing your experiences, sir. Now, I request the key person behind this webinar, Dr. Lalita Joseph ma'am, Secretary General of KAHO, to share a few words with us about what is KAHO and what do they do.
Thank you so much, Dr. Venkatesh, Dr. Abul, and Dr. Shiv. It's a great opportunity for all of us to work together. And I really appreciate the leadership at such young age that you are exhibiting and bringing the junior doctors together on such a wonderful forum. And kudos to the Indian Medical Association, the Junior Doctors Wing. To tell you something about the consortium of accredited healthcare organizations, we are a not-for-profit society established to promote patient safety, quality, and accreditation in this country. Our stakeholder base is large, ever expanding because of the number of training programs that we are offering. So our training programs are focusing more and more on practical issues and implementation, helping the stakeholders, which is the hospitals, diagnostic divisions, and also individual practitioners establish quality and patient safety in their hospitals. So it's a very proud moment for us that we are partnering with you, the young champions of quality and patient safety, the Indian Medical Association's Junior Doctors Network, and really look forward to series of interaction with you and knowledge sharing to your audience. Thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity provided to us, and all the very best to you in all the endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, I am privileged to welcome our honorable speaker, Dr. Jayalakshmi ma'am. Ma'am is a microbiologist and also holds MBA degree in hospital administration, FIMA, PGD MLE, and ISQA fellowship. Ma'am is the professor and head of Department of Microbiology at KMCH Institute of Health Sciences and Research, Coimbatore. Ma'am is currently holding many positions in various forums Like ma'am is a PhD guide in Tamil Nadu Dr. MGR Medical University, NABL Lead Assessor, NABH Assessor, JCI Internal Surveyor, South Representative Lead for Kaho Diagnostics, National Advisory Board Member for NLM Lab. She has a vast teaching experience of more than 23 years for both undergraduate and postgraduate students. Her area of interest is infection prevention and control, molecular biology, and quality assurance in medical profession education and healthcare facility. She has guided many undergraduate and postgraduate students and has many national and international publications to her credit. With this brief intro, I would like to welcome our honorable speaker, Dr. Jayalakshmi ma'am. Welcome, ma'am.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Venkatesh, for those wonderful words of introduction. First of all, my special thanks to Vijay sir and Lalu for giving me an opportunity to be part of today's Junior IMA, the first collaborative session of Junior IMA and Kaho, and being the first speaker, I'm really privileged and honored. And thanks, Dr. Venkatesh, Dr. Abul Hassan sir, and Dr. Shiv for the wonderful opportunity. Without wasting much time, let me take you straight away to what we plan for today. And this is like Purser was mentioning, the most important topic, and currently also much more than it would otherwise be, also for the amount of waste that we are generating and adding more to the planet, right? I bring greetings from my institute, KMCH Institute of Health Sciences and Research, Coimbatore. And it's a concern. You would see biomedical waste in forms of PPs and other waste being strewn all over the place and being a hazard across all environment, as well as it is being used, or the reuse of these biomedical waste which is not being treated and becoming a concern for patient care and safety as well. So this is something that's pretty much serious, and what we are talking about is biomedical waste management. And today, for the next half an hour to 45 minutes, we'll quickly look into what is biomedical waste, how do you classify, and what are the different types of biomedical waste that you have, what's the life cycle of these biomedical waste, what are the risks associated with them, what are the safety concerns, and how do you protect the healthcare professionals handling these biomedical waste, how do you monitor these biomedical waste in any healthcare facility, and what are the COVID waste guidelines as of today. Biomedical waste is any waste that is generated during diagnosis, treatment, or immunization. Both it could be for humans or animals, and it could be in research or in production of biologicals. So it could be in any of these facilities, wherever you are generating a waste, you would call them as biomedical waste. And this is under, as per the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change, and which guides the Central Pollution Control Board, which also guides the State Pollution Control Board, which is how we would follow these biomedical waste guidelines. Right. So this is today's burden of biomedical waste in the country. If you would see, it is 203 tons of biomedical waste per day, and this is so much in line with the number of cases of COVID that would increase. And you would see that it's much higher. And this is only in May 2021. Of course, with the number of cases of COVID coming down, there may be slightly lesser, but however, it's still a concern. And in an average, you would still have about some 100 tons of waste being generated. And what is concerning is the amount of waste which is not being treated before its final disposal. That would be a huge area of concern. Now, if you look at the states that would generate these kind of waste, there are some states which is a little more in the leading compared to the other, also because of the better documentation that they would have. Right. So now, if you would see, also adding to the biomedical waste because of the COVID and the cases related to COVID, healthcare workers and the patients attendant, and all others wearing PPEs or protective gears, and adding to the biomedical waste load also is because of the vaccination drive that you have. That doesn't mean that you should not get vaccinated, but what is this adding to? It is just that it is predicted by the Central Pollution Control Board that by the end of the year, that is when you try to end the vaccination drive for the country, it would be about 1.3 billion used syringes and needles and at least 100 million discarded glass vials. So that's a worrying thing that we have, which the COVID has added into the already existing problem of biomedical waste. Now, if you would classify the amount of waste that is coming up in a hospital, it is said that every bed or a patient bed in any hospital would generate as low as 0.25 to up to 4 kgs of waste, but an average would be 1 to 2 kgs per bed per day. This is an average Indian hospital bed statistics of waste generated. But the good news of the waste that is generated is that 80% of these are general waste, which includes kitchen waste like food peels, teacups, foils, plastics, leftover food, packing material, wrappers, cartoon packs, all of these. But 20% of them are biomedical waste, and that's a concern. Now, 15% of these are infectious waste, 3% chemical or pharmaceutical waste, 1% of them is sharps, and 1% is radioactive, cytotoxic, or metallic waste, or heavy metal waste. Now, if you see the types of waste that would be, it could be these placenta, amputated tissue, or from the laboratories as tissues post-testing, or blood-soaked linen, or you could have cotton swabs, PPs, or caps, masks, your glass slides, culture plates, samples, medicines, or you could have cytotoxic drugs within them, or you could have the plastics, the blood bags, the urinary catheters, vacuum tubes, scalpel blades, metallic tops of these vials, and syringes, needles. Okay, all of these could be the waste that could be there. You cannot put them all together and then try to segregate them. So that would be a huge risk of infection. Now, if you would see what did they do in the past, so like Sir was mentioning, it was those important court cases that brought in about one decision and then followed which was another, which helped into streamlining. There has been few amendments over the years on proper segregation and disposal of biomedical waste or biomedical waste handling. In the past, what they would do is, if they would have a hospital or a clinic, somebody runs a clinic or has a hospital, the person who is running a clinic would dispose the waste that is generated in his clinic in a side or a municipal dustbin on the way back to his house. Or if it's a hospital, they take all the waste that has been generated from that hospital that day and take it out and go and dump it in some wasteland, or burn them all up, or put them in some water bodies, etc. So this used to be very much in the for practice in the past, which had a huge amount of risk. So now, what are the risks associated with these biomedical waste handling or improper handling of these biomedical waste? So unsafe segregation, like putting them all together and then trying to remove them to reclaim some of the waste because they could be recycled and reused, because medical grade plastics are good quality, they can be sold at a good rate and they would get a lot of money out of it. So unsafe segregations lead to injuries. And then sometimes it is reuse of equipments. You will see that a lot of times there would be staff within the hospital who might pilfer the material and sell them into smaller facilities or smaller laboratories or small places or personal use. They would take it to their homes, and the way they would treat them to decontaminate, to reuse, would be very crude. Just boil them or just wipe them or just dip them in some solution and then start to use them, has a high risk of infection. The other is unsafe disposal itself. If it's put closer to where people are staying or living, or wherever people are living, or it could be in close to the water bodies where you would have water being contaminated. Burning them all up would lead to air pollutions, because a lot of furans and dioxins would be released because of burning of these plastics, which is very harmful. So toxic and harmful fumes in the air, in the water, in the soil, altering the flora of the soil, and the infected material coming in contact. And people there, you would definitely see some rag pickers. At least you don't see them so obvious these days, but you would have rag pickers who would just pick up those waste which would be useful for them to sell for money. So all of these are huge risks. So the three things that they would always focus on would be injuries, infection that gets transmitted, and also the toxic effects of these chemicals, right? So 1998 was when Sir mentioned that we had a biomedical waste handling, but the rule with 10 different categories of the waste that I listed came into, and then they would have 5 different colors for segregation of these waste, and it used to be followed. Since we didn't have much more clarity of segregation or disposal of waste, or guidelines or rules on use of incinerators or having or holding. And then in the past, it used to be if you have a bed number less than 1,000, you will have to be going in for an authorization. Otherwise, you're really not required to. So it was not standardized. So standardization was not there. There was no practices which was closely monitored. There wasn't any binding. So then came this biomedical waste rule of 2016 after lots and lots of thinking, brainstorming, and from cases that were found. And it's a rule. Biomedical waste or biomedical waste management is a rule from 2016, and it was released in March 28th of March 2016 by then Minister. So this rule, again, since it would come under the Ministry of Environment and Forest and Climate Change and the Central Pollution Control Board, and it had its most important focus of concept being try to reduce wherever possible. Wherever this biomedical waste was happening, just make every effort to see that it is reduced. Then see whether there is an opportunity for reuse of something without compromising either the quality or safety of the personnel who would be handling, or the person to whom care is delivered. So you will have to see whether there is any reusability, and then see whether it can be recycled in a way it is safe and reused. Probably these plastics coming back as different forms, maybe the tubings coming back to us as buckets. Now this brings to me, into my memory of something very, very interesting that happened as a study done by one of the IIMs in the past. So they wanted to see what happens to the waste that is discarded, and what happens to these waste that are being picked up by rag pickers and then sold to for money, and what happens to these. So they started to track these urine bags. Okay, so what happens to the urine bags which have been, so they had focused this to the urine bags and catheters, and then they found them all landing up into some small scale industry in a small dingy place, which was which was just tiled and had a shed on top. And you would see that people are working on and preparing and coming up with manufacturing units which had straw coming out of it. Now I'm sure you all understand the logic behind making. I don't think anybody would suspect that the urine bags are immediately cut into plastic straws. No, not at all. So the plastic urine bags were modified or were converted into straw after they've been melted and then modified. But this process was happening in a small place where there was no way segregation of the finished product to the ones that were contaminated, which with a huge risk of contamination, of cross-contamination of the contaminated urine bags to the finished product of the straws. So this was happening and was made available to the other facilities. So this is actually what actually can happen if these wastes are not being handled. So this 2016 focused on all these 3 areas into its making in every level, and tried to bring about standardization as close as possible and to as easy applicable as possible, and have rules and regulations so strong as possible, and ensure that there is a good monitoring which is flowing down from the ministry to the Central Pollution Control Board, to the State Pollution Control Board, to the hospitals, etc. So the hospitals or whichever healthcare facility would be having this would used to be called as occupiers. Okay, then the person who would take up the waste from the facilities to process them and convert them, or take the waste from the facilities and work on them on final treatment and disposal, they would be called as operators, right? So you have the occupiers and the operators handling at both levels, and they have separate rules and regulations given specifically what the operators need to do, how they are supposed to treat and finally dispose, to the same as what a healthcare facility or a lab unit should do as a occupier. Now, where would this biomedical waste rule apply? Does it apply only to larger hospitals or hospitals which have more than 1,000 beds? No, it applies to every hospital, every nursing home, clinic or dispensary, veterinary institutions or animal houses, even in those areas where animal experiments are done, pathological labs, blood banks, Ayush hospitals, any other clinical establishments, anywhere research or educational institutions are anywhere within the research or educational institutions where products or any animal or human products are being used for study, health camps, medical or surgical camps, vaccination camps, even if it is done within a factory. If vaccinations are given to people within a factory, if a hospital wants to plan to give vaccination to n number of people in a factory, and there it would apply. This biomedical waste rule would apply even in that particular camp, blood donation camps, first aid rooms of schools, even if the school has a lot of girl children and they would be they'll be throwing these sanitary napkins, they say it would be applying for them as well in the future. Then is the forensic laboratory and research labs. In all of these things, all of these situations, this biomedical waste rule of 2016 would apply. Now, let me show you this particular slide where it says 2016, and in the bracket I've put as 2018 and 2019 amended, which means the rule came in 2016, but small changes were made in the month of March 2018 and month of February in 2019. Very small changes, but very significant and important changes, because whenever a rule gets applied, then only people start to understand what are the difficulties, whether this works or doesn't work. So you start to look at how and what needs to be changed. And if that need to be changed, it should be communicated to all. So that would come as an amendment. So the entire document remains the same, except for those small changes made within them, which are called as amendments in the document. And that such amendments had come in 2018 and 2019. As we go by, I will tell you what are the amendments in 2018 and 2019, right? So now this biomedical waste rule had an important part of segregating the biomedical waste into 4 different categories based on the final treatment and disposal for that particular waste, whether it's going to get incinerated, or whether it's going to be autoclaved or hydroclaved and reclaimed later, or it's going to be shredded and put into the landfills. Okay, so depending on what is going to happen to these waste, depending on the final treatment and disposal, they got color coded. Now, why should you color code? This is for standardization of the practice. So I may know English or Tamil or Hindi, but I may not know Kannada or Telugu. When I go to another state and I see it written in a particular language, then I may not be able to see. So without even opening the bag, I need to know what is inside. Okay, so it becomes a standard. It just says that this color for this particular final treatment and disposal will hold these biomedical waste within them. So you have a color yellow, blue, red, and white. Okay, so this is to know the waste that has to go inside, and everybody, whether the person is well educated or not educated at all, working as a class 4 employee of a hospital, they need to know where to dispose what waste. And thereby, this would improve the compliance to the practice. So everybody would dispose appropriately the waste. So that means at a point that the waste is generated, it would get segregated immediately. I'm sure we all even follow the same even in our homes, that the wet waste and the dry waste, we color code and separate it in quite a few places. And you might have seen in common places, whether it is in the malls or in the airports, etc., you will see them very clearly color coded to say what would go into what, and it would be easy for everybody to follow the same. And it definitely reduces a mix up of these waste, and therefore risk of injuries or would be very, very minimal in such situations, right? Now let's look at what goes into the yellow category of waste. The yellow category of waste would include within it human anatomical waste, animal anatomical waste, which is post-research, or soiled waste. These are infectious non-plastic wastes. It could have non-soil linen, soil beddings, etc. All of these discarded into them. Okay. Along with it would also have other waste like the blood bags, microbiology and biotechnology waste, all the waste that is generated from the laboratories or molecular testing laboratories, or sometimes even the vaccines, which may be the live or killed vaccine. All of these would go into these containers, which are non-chlorinated bags, because you cannot burn chlorinated bags. Why would I say that? Because when you burn them, they would release toxic fumes. So you need to have bags which are of 50 microns, the measurement at least, and non-chlorinated, which has this biohazard symbol on this. Okay, this biohazard symbol on it, and this is whatever needs to be burned straight away gets into the bag directly. But those coming from the laboratories, which includes the blood bags or the culture plates coming from, or the vaccines, all of these gets pre-treated with autoclaving. This is by using a dedicated autoclave. You do not use the same autoclave that you use for sterilizing your instruments in the same. You use a dedicated autoclave where you autoclave for 121 degrees centigrade with the 15 pounds of pressures for 60 minutes, unlike what you would read in the textbooks of microbiology, that it is okay to autoclave for 15 minutes. Okay, your 15 minutes would definitely kill, but for the decontamination, the autoclave need to be run for 60 minutes, and you need to have chemical indicators stuck on, and that has to be checked to see whether it has gone by. And once in a week, at least use a biological indicator to check whether the system is working well, and this would help in validating this process as well. Now, all of these go into a waste, and if you would see, it's a yellow bag, okay, put into a yellow container, and this has a symbol which is biohazard symbol on it. Now, if you would see other two things that goes also into the yellow category, one is the expired medicines and discarded medicines or remains of the medicines, etc. This would go into the bag, and this bag does not have the symbol biohazard on it. It has a symbol C on it. Of course, also would hold cytotoxic drugs also in the same with a symbol C on it, but the cytotoxic drug holding bags with a symbol C has to be exclusive and very, very well separated. Now, let me tell you or take you to an example of an oncology unit or a ward where cytotoxic drugs are being prepared and being used on patients. Here, the entire set, when I say the entire set, the medicine, the IV line, okay, the PPE that the person is wearing to prepare the cytotoxic drugs, and all that being used, maybe the swab to clean the site and holding everything, and the glove that is used, everything gets bagged into a single yellow bag with a cytotoxic symbol C on it. And this is documented in a register, and this is handed over to the manufacturer for final disposal. So you have, again, within this category C, where your C would have for chemicals, which is discarded medicines and chemicals going in there, and also another symbol C with a yellow bag on it, the symbol C on a yellow bag, which says for the cytotoxic drugs generated in a specific area, and everything except the sharp, which is a needle, everything gets bagged into a single. So there is no segregation for cytotoxic drugs because they are highly toxic, and you don't want anybody to get exposed to these cytotoxic drugs. Therefore, you don't segregate it. You put them all together and bag them and hand over to the manufacturer for its final treatment and disposal. So for others, which is your chemicals, go into the C symbol, gets into and gets disposed, right? Then is another, which is the yellow category again. But if you would see here, these are the liquid waste, which is coming from the operation theater, the CSST, the laboratories, or the dialysis unit, or the ICU hand wash areas, where you would have blood and body fluids, contaminated solutions coming into the drain or the water drains that would come. So this you don't dispose directly. You pre-treat them with 1% sodium hypochlorite solution for at least for a period of half an hour. So the drain line also goes into, or it could be engineered in such a way that there is a holding time. In quite a few labs, what they have is they have a drum-like thing where it infuses these 1% sodium hypochlorite and allows the final hold of the water that is being collected or the specimens that have been collected, and hold it for 30 minutes, then let open, and this goes into the ETP or the STP plant. And this is the process that you would do for the liquid waste. Also includes the same thing would also include for those water that would be collected after washing the floors, okay, or the discarded disinfectants. All of these goes through a process of pre-treatment. Now, this was one of the amendment from 2016 to 2018 or 2016 to 2018 guideline. The 2016 guideline said to use 10% sodium hypochlorite. Probably it was a typo error. So it was supposed to be 1%, but since it was in the final document for circulation, it was used and later withdrawn, and then it was made into 1% sodium hypochlorite solution. So we have in the yellow category one which goes directly without any pre-treatment, which is your tissues, the PP kit, the swab, the diapers, the sanitary napkins, the placenta, and the tissues, everything, and the animal waste going straight. And those which is the blood bags, the microbiology waste, all of them after pre-treatment going there, and all of these get incinerated. Then you have the drugs, where you have the cytotoxic drugs and the others which are expired drugs and the remains of the drugs going into a container which holds in and gets disposed. This gets into the landfill, and the cytotoxic drugs, if they would be straight away handled, it is for incineration at 1200 degrees centigrade, where it completely gets converted into an ash. The liquid waste, though it says yellow container, it is not supposed to be poured into a yellow bag or a yellow bucket. It is not supposed to be held so. It is just coded with the color red, but needs to be with a holding time of 1 hour. Holding time of 30 minutes with 1% sodium hypochlorite. You allow it to be decontaminating, and then finally allow it to go to the ETP or STP plant. Okay, so this is about the yellow waste, right? Moving on to the next three categories. I'm taking them parallelly, but however, one after the other. First, let's take the red category. Previously, we looked at those infectious non-plastic waste. Now here we are looking at the infectious plastic waste, which can be recycled. Now, since it can be recycled, some of them at least need to be recycled so that you can reclaim good amount of plastic and you can reuse them, from the syringes to the pots and pans that you can get them to. So this has to be thrown in after getting mutilated or auto disable. You have those syringes where it automatically breaks in so that it cannot be used a second time. So the main idea behind this is that the cutting or mutilation of these plastic is so that it has not been used again in the same form by another person. It becomes useless for its use as intended earlier. So you mutilate and then put them into these non-chlorinated red bags. Okay, and then this is put into the red bins, which has the symbol, the biohazard symbol on it. Then you have the category which is the blue waste. Now this blue waste, okay, which would have the broken glass. It could be from the laboratories where you have the stained glass, glass slides, which may be there, or your Petri plates or Petri dishes, the conical flasks that are broken. Contaminated glasses could be there. It could be from the vials or the ampules or metallic body implants. Any of these metal pieces or broken scissors or broken blades, okay, which is longer, which cannot, or if it's a guide wire which is huge. So all of these which need to be disposed goes into these blue container. This is a puncture-proof container because broken glass is going to pierce through your bags and then poke through people. So therefore, you need to have them puncture-proof. The previous one here, this is the second amendment that I'm going to mention to you about what was there in 2016 to 2018. In 2016, it mentioned about the use of a cardboard box which has a blue liner on it saying that this is the container in which you will be disposing broken glass and metallic implants. However, it was found that when people used to lift these this cardboard box holding the glasses, it used to open up and fall down. Okay, and it was the instruction on how to gum them all up, was not really given. So therefore, it was not used as it was intended or planned to across the country. Remember, this biomedical waste rule is applicable to the corporate hospital, which is some 203,000 or to 2,000 or 3,000 bedded hospital, to a very small primary health center or a government facility in a rural settings also. So it applies all areas. So it has to be something that can be followed at every facility. Okay, so it should be easily implementable, easily available material, and it should be followed by everybody so that there is no misuse at any level, whether it would be a corporate hospital or any other hospital to a small, very small facility as well. So this became a very difficult one for them to follow. So therefore, they moved into having a blue punch-proof container. And remember, all these bags should always be covered, right? So now this is the last one, which is the white category of waste, which would hold this. This should be a translucent white container, which has a biohazard symbol on it written with a mark line at 3/4 saying that not to fill beyond that. None of the waste in either of any of the bags, either yellow, red, blue or white, should be added more than its 2/3 or 3/4 full, because it will overflowing biomedical waste always a risk of infection and injuries. So never ever do that. So needles, blades, scalpels, and syringes with fixed needle, like the insulin syringes, all of these need to be disposed into them. And in the past, it was a practice to use 1% sodium hypochlorite, but not to use them at all now. All you need to do is shred them or cut them using a needle cutter, so that it becomes not, so it cuts through the hub, so that the plastic is also not usable, the needle is also not usable. The needle gets collected into a needle container or sharps collector, and then the plastic gets disposed in the red bags. So that way you don't allow the needle to be reused nor the syringe. Okay, so this is about the white category of waste, right? Now this is a biomedical waste poster, thanks to CMC Vellore, who shared this this particular poster with us. So here we have, just to show you, in 2016, if you would see, it says blue bag in cardboard box. Now this is how you can display your posters. This with the picture would also help people and guide them into proper disposal of their biomedical waste. So it clearly says which waste goes where, and with a picture, it would definitely help. Okay. This is in 2018. If you would see, it becomes a punch-proof container where you have your glasswares being disposed. Okay. And of course, please remember the treatment of the liquid waste is always with 1% sodium hypochlorite, okay, before its final treatment. Now, these are the labels that are required to be put up on the bags that hold these biomedical waste from any area. So it has to tell which day, month, and year is it, what is the date of generation of this particular waste, what category of waste, what is the quantity of the waste, which means you have to weigh the waste in every area that is generated. Who's sending it? What's the phone number? What's a contact person? Okay, who's the contact person? Whom do you contact in case of emergency? All of these need to be there, and this should be a non-washable label, which should be prominently visible for us to be seen. So this has to be stuck up on the bags, and this would always help us to know whether if in case the waste been thrown away from some places. I can give you another example what happened in the past. Okay, so one time we had a query from one of the somebody concerned, some senior person in the locality there, and called up and said, see, we have a complaint raised, and this has been come up to the pollution control board, that they would want to ask you that you had some waste that has been thrown here, and this has your hospital's label on it. So now you tell us what So this was after cleaning up of a museum which had some old and shriveled specimens. So these specimens, including some of the fetuses, okay, which were kept in the museum, were after documentation were all discarded, and then it was bagged properly in the yellow bags with a label and stuck and sent. But what happened was the person, the third party who takes the waste from the facility didn't find it very useful because he's not going to get any money out of it. So why would the operator or the the treatment facility person, the operator who runs the facility, be interested in waste which he cannot make money with? So he thought if he would have this bag, he will not be able to collect another hospital's plastic waste, which can give him some money. So what he did was he just took that bag and threw away. This was far away from the hospital where I was working. So but the query, because of the label, it came back to us. Thanks that we had documented it exactly, and we had weighed it. We had put every detail of it, and they had to file or transfer the case of whatever this inquiry to the common treatment facility. And not that you have to find fault or shift the complaint. It was not that, but it is definitely useful to know why and what is happening, and what type of waste is being generated, and who is the person to contact if there would be a query that is being raised at all in any situation. So there need to be a documentation of what waste, how much is generated in that area, and this has to be maintained in any healthcare facility, which includes the waste in weight ideally. But many hospitals or healthcare facility would start with at least documenting number of bags. They would say 1 bag of yellow, 1 bag of red, because the punch-proof container doesn't get full to the 3/4, so they would not dispose the white waste so often. But the yellow and the red waste would go much more often every day, and the white would go when it is done. So they would weigh. You would put in numbers to start with, but it's a must that you weigh the waste and then put it, and then say date of collection of the waste, because in a place where it is generated, in a place where the waste is generated, it cannot stay for more than 24 hours. Let me give you an example. So in a phlebotomy unit, when you collect the blood for testing, swabbing the site would be with a cotton, and then you take the blood with a needle and then collect it in a syringe and then send or you transfer it into a container and then send it to the laboratory for testing, or it could be straight away collected into a vacuumized tubing, and then that sample is being sent for testing. Now the waste that is coming out here would be a sharp waste, it could be a plastic waste, and a cotton waste which is coming, which are 3 different categories of waste which need to be segregated into yellow, red, and a white container, and this has to be disposed in that site, immediately segregated. Now if the waste is generated now at around 5 or 6:30 in the evening, now tomorrow the same time at 6:29, it should not be here in this particular area. So it cannot be there more than 24 hours in an area that it is generated, but it cannot be there within the healthcare facility for more than 48 hours from the time it is generated, which means day after tomorrow by 6:29, the entire waste should be out of the facility totally. Okay, and it also includes when it was collected, who collected it, okay, and the person who gave the waste and the person who received would all be documented. Okay, so these are the stickers that need to be stuck on the waste, depending on whether it requires a biohazard symbol or does it require a C symbol for cytotoxic or chemical waste. Appropriately, those symbols have to be there, and that need to be documented. And it needs the barcoding. The barcoding is given by the common treatment facility or the operator, okay, the third party person who takes waste from the facility. Okay, so there is generation of waste in the hospital, and the hospital has to enroll with the State Pollution Control Board, okay, and then they register for the number of beds that they have, and they declare the number of beds and say, we are going to kindly grant us permission to generate, to segregate, to collect, to transport, and finally dispose the waste. So please give us the permission or authorization to do that. Then they will also link with the common treatment facility, who would say, yes, these people have registered, please, common treatment facility, please come and tie up with them, make an MOU with them, and then take the waste from this particular hospital or a healthcare facility and take it for your final treatment and disposal for a price or a money that would be identified by the Pollution Control Board. Okay, so you don't give away your waste for money. In fact, you have to give them money for taking waste from your facility. All right. So this common treatment facility becomes responsible from then on to taking the waste from your from the facility, the healthcare facility, to its final treatment and disposal. So they would give you the barcoding, which would be stuck up on these entire of this, and this would be linked to a GPR system, which would be tagged to the transporting device of transporting container, which transports the waste from the healthcare facility to the common treatment facility for its final treatment and disposal, right? So these are the essentials of documentation. One on the label stuck on the bag, the register which has these documentation, the barcoding that is stuck, or the label stuck on the bags by itself, and then whether it is, depending on the waste, whether it's a biohazard symbol or the cytotoxic C symbol on them, right? Now, transporting of biomedical waste, when within the facility, when you're taking the waste within the facility, it has to be through a route where you don't have patients and public, and clinical activities are happening. So you always take the biomedical waste through a dedicated route if it is available, if it's possible, in a dedicated space or a route with a trolley, which is covered trolley, which has color coding, which gives exactly what color to put. In fact, the inner of the trolley that I'm showing you here also has the same color. So it is partitioned into 3 different bags, and like I told you earlier, the white is usually sharps are separately transported sometimes, or within this there would have another additional area for holding these punch-proof containers to take them away from here. So each of these are color coded from the time it is segregated at the point where it is generated to the time to its final treatment and disposal. Always the waste remains segregated. So it will be in its own color coded spaces to get transferred. Then this side, what I'm showing you in the white van is what is from the common treatment facility, the biomedical waste common treatment facility, which has a GPS attached, so that there is also linked to the barcoding. So it will track immediately, it can track. And this would help in regulation of the biomedical waste, because there is a huge amount of pilferage that can occur from the area generated to the area where it will be stored in the hospital, and also from the area where it is stored to the common treatment facility by 2 different sets of people within the hospital. It could be the staff working in the hospital, and from the hospital to the common treatment facility in its entire journey of its travel, it could be from anybody from who's working with the common treatment facility. So it has to be very careful. Now, what would you see if you see the waste that has been transferred across the facility? You will see that, in the wards or in a clinical area, there is generation, segregation of the waste, disinfection and sterilization. Like I told you, 1% sodium hypochlorite for disinfecting liquid waste, or sterilization, like what we autoclave the blood bags, and then temporary storage would happen, within that same area, in the same clinical area for 24 hours. And there should be the record maintenance that I mentioned. You have to weigh the waste and tell how much of waste is generated, right? In the common storage area, this is a common storage area, which is an area dedicated for storing all the waste that is generated from that particular healthcare facility, or it could be a hospital or any health center. You have a dedicated area where you collect all the waste from every clinical area and collect them there for a storage period before somebody from the common treatment facility come and collect the waste from here. Okay, so this is that area. It's almost like if you're living in a flat system, you will have waste or dustbin in your house, then you take all of that and keep it in some common area where the municipal would take it away. So similar to that is what you would see with a clinical area to the common storage area. Then you have the treatment or disposal, which is happening in the common treatment facility, which is almost like 25 kilometers away from the center of the city, where it is, in which has a huge area for its final treatment and disposal. And that land is usually given by the state government or through the Pollution Control Board for the treatment and disposal of the biomedical waste. And here, what you would see across in all the three areas is a record maintenance. If there is 1 kg of waste generated in the area, that in a clinical area, it should show same 1 kg of waste in the common storage area. It should show the same 1 kg of waste in the common treatment facility. If there would be difference, that means there has been some kind of pilferage between in any of these sites here that you would see. Okay. Now, this is a common storage area in a hospital. If you would see, they are also color coded. It usually has a hand wash area, a area where it has some long pipes to wash the area, and see to that they are well closed, a little ventilated. But what you see on the infectious, the top, not actually acceptable. They have to be grilled well so that they're closed, so that it does not allow any birds or rodents to get into these places because of the smell of these infectious material, the blood and body, or the body fluids or tissues. This would attract a lot of rodents, dogs, birds, etc. So you always have them close with a little bit of gap for ventilation that is allowed, and you have them color coded so that you put only the red bags in one area, yellow bags in one area, white punch-proof bags here in one area, and none of the waste that is generated in the hospital cannot stay in the hospital for more than 48 hours, right? This is a common treatment facilities very far away from the city. It was usually by a private person who has been approved by the State Pollution Control Board to work as a common treatment facility. They have all the regulation, like I told you, what is required by the rule, would have facilities of incinerators, thermoclaves, or the plasma pyrolysis equipments that they would have for final burning up these waste, or using these autoclaves, or these thermoclaves are nothing but those autoclaves which are higher in its temperatures, in modifying, and sometimes you convert them into smaller pieces and then autoclave them and then finally dispose them. Right, so you can, because it's for plastics, then you can shred and dispose. You can hold them, and if it's metallic pieces, you mutilate them and then you transfer. I'm just going to just show you quickly into how these common treatment facilities would work. Let's look at this area. Let me start through the registration process. This is like a healthcare facility registering with a common treatment facility, which is the third party, where you have an MOU with them. So the third parties, the common treatment facilities responsibility is also to teach and train the healthcare facility under them on the processes of biomedical waste handling and disposal, because they are going to receive from the healthcare facilities. So if they don't teach them how they would want their waste to be collected, then there would not happen. So teaching happens both at the healthcare facility, also added by the common treatment facility, teaching the healthcare facilities. So they'll have to teach them, they'll give them the logistics of giving them the barcodes, the bags are given by them, and it's available on these bags, and they start to collect waste from the healthcare facility. What you see here with the plus symbol here is the hospital, just a diagrammatic representation where collection of waste happens, and here it comes and there is unloading of the waste. And this here you would see that the waste gets into 3 different areas, but the yellow and the red usually goes in for the incinerators or this goes into the landfill, and the red ones usually goes for autoclaving, because you need to reclaim these wastes, and so they go to recycling centers later. So the ash that would come from the incinerators, which usually burns at about 800 to 1200 degrees centigrade, goes into these fills or landfills, where they're put in and then they are covered completely. So this is how the common treatment facility works, and each common treatment facility would have to cater to every healthcare facility which is in its 75 kilometers radius. Okay, so within the 75 kilometer radius, whichever healthcare facility would come, it is the this particular common treatment facility or the operator would have to cater to that. Okay, so these are some alternatives that is there. One, I wouldn't say both are not alternatives. One of them is, which is a deep burial pit. Deep burial pit are those which is available to those facilities which don't come within that limit of 75 kilometers, but still a healthcare facility which would be generating waste. So they can, okay, have deep burial pits, which would be, it should be at least about 2 meters deep. Okay, and then they would allow completely concreted on the sites and allow deposition of biomedical waste. And then when it comes to a height of about 50 centimeters, then you cover it with the sodium hypochlorite or lime, and then close them with the mesh and soil and cover them completely. So this is what you would do. Now, what is important to note is the deepest point of this particular pit or the burial pit should be much higher than any water body below them. So 6 meters and below, if below that should be the water body. Anything more closer to between 6 meters, it is never allowed. You should never allow a deep burial pit. So it is important to look at whether there is any water body, any water source underneath that there is there, to check and verify before you have a deep burial pit, even in those areas which don't have an access for final treatment and disposal. The other is a sharp pit, where the mutilated needles and glass is usually put in these, which are almost like an encapsulated ones, which is concreted on all sides. You keep putting them in these pits and then cover them completely. Once the entire thing is closed off, you open up another sharp pit a little far away, and then dig it up, make a capsulated one, fill them completely, then you can seal them and use them more like this. So alternative to these is the final in the treatment process is that the mutilated or broken down glass and needles can also be mixed with cement, and they may be used for making blocks, which may be used for some roads, etc. So these are alternatives that are available for final treatment and disposal. However, all of these are only after they are disinfected or decontaminated and then mixed with the concrete and then used for strengthening of some sites, right? So now looking at the safety of the healthcare workers. So very, very common for the healthcare workers who are handling biomedical waste to get a needle stick injury, because there may be an accidental mix-up of biomedical waste where you have the sharps disposed into an yellow bag, or it could be in the red bag, or it could be in the general waste. So the healthcare worker who's handling may get injured. So it's always important that you anticipate the risk and protect yourself using personal protectors. And this is not the regular latex glove that they should be wearing. They should be wearing a heavy duty gloves which covers at least up to the elbow and up to the knee, so that they don't get pricked by and come in contact with this infectious material, right? And it's important that the healthcare workers handling biomedical waste need to be vaccinated with hepatitis B and tetanus. Training should be conducted to these healthcare workers or healthcare professionals at least once a year on segregation, disposal, treatment, transportation of biomedical waste, safety in the workplace, etc. All of these for everybody. It may sound why for a person who already knows, it's important that they get retrained often. Okay, there are a few forms that need to be filled up by the occupier. No, occupier is a hospital or the healthcare facility which is generating the waste. One is an accident report. Now, what is an accident report? It is not the needle stick injury that you need to report, but if there is a fire in a storage area of biomedical waste, or accidentally when transporting the biomedical waste, it tripped over and fell into a water body, okay, or there was an accident, or there was a bomb blast, in any of these. So this accident need to be reported. The other is application for authorization, when I would want or when I need to be renewed. Then is the annual report. Everyday documentation has to be summed up into a monthly report, and this has to be updated into a website. So in the State Pollution Control Board website that you with the authorization, you would also be receiving a login ID and a password for individual healthcare facility, where they have to enroll and enter monthly waste that is generated, waste wise, yellow waste, red waste, white and blue waste. and has to be put in them. And annual report of everything with the biomedical waste need to be given, including how many training was conducted, how many people were vaccinated, whether any accidents happened that within the facility. All of that need to be given by 30th of June. And if there is anything that they would appeal to, they say, okay, no, I don't agree to what is being raised on against us. We have not done such a thing, etc. Such an appealing also. So these are various forms that are available as well. And it's very important to remember that it's a rule, and violating the rule means a punishment, and punishments could be as high as imprisonment of the person, the person or the occupier who's responsible for that organization or a healthcare facility, or for 5 years imprisonment or 1 lakh fine, or both. So this depends on the type of deviation to the complaints. So they are supposed to follow these things, and if they are not, and after a few reminders not done, etc., so all of these would lead to serious punishments. So this is something that need to be remembered. Okay. Important to monitor biomedical waste, and this monitoring can be done by auditing, to trying to look at what is actually happening by direct observation using a checklist and going around and seeing, or you can use the CCTV cameras in specified areas to see what's happening with the disposal of biomedical waste, whether there is segregation, to see what's happening. So every possible way of looking at how to minimize the waste, whether segregation is happening on time properly, whether the person collecting is collecting using appropriate PPE, whether the collection is happening on the way it is recommended, whether they're transporting in the dedicated colored spaces, are they transporting covered, are they wearing PPE as recommended, okay, are they storing in the central storage area as described in the color coded areas, whether they are clean, are they being washed every day after removal, are they being weighed every day, okay, and when it is sent there, are they treating this appropriately and disposing. Now this treating and disposing cannot be the healthcare facilities activity. It is something that is done by the common treatment facility or the third party who's taking the waste from our facility. Now how do you do this? So at least once in 6 months, the healthcare facility should go and inspect the site again with a checklist to see whether they are following, because the waste that they are treating is from your organization or your healthcare facility. Therefore, you need to go to those sites and check and verify whether they are doing as they declared that they would do. So you will have to check all that and see at randomly pick dates. You want to see what was the weight at your generating space, at your storage area, and in the common treatment facility. If all of these 3 are not in line, then there would be some issue. So this is something that you need to be monitoring. This has to be reviewed again to the biomedical waste that has been generated from month to month also. So last month to this month, there is an increased amount of waste. You need to know why. Is it because of the increase in caseload, or is it because casually some people are just disposing number of gloves more than required? So you need to teach and train people on how to use gloves, the types of gloves, and when to dispose after, how to hold themselves, and not just dispose gloves after each activity when it is not warranted, right? And then check based on the barcoding also would help you, because easily you get a data because they are linked and it is available. So even the Pollution Control Board has a track of what is happening for the waste that is generated in a healthcare facility. So it's important to note that any hospital which has more than 30 beds should have a hospital biomedical waste committee, which would comprise of the management representative, the infection control team, which would be the infection control doctor and the nurse, okay, the environmental officer or a safety officer if available in the hospital, the housekeeping staff, the nursing staff who's handling, and if there would be a person assigned specifically for handling the biomedical waste, yes, that person would be sitting together once in every 6 months to review the waste and see which waste can we reduce, which activity can we modify so that this particular waste can get reduced. So every opportunity should be looked at to see what waste, how much of waste are we generating, and how can we reduce the waste. That should be the objective of every meeting of this, right? This is just to give you an example of what is the amendment in 2019, because I told you about the 2016 and 2018. Now the amendment in 2019, the key alone I have just highlighted here. So they'll have to update it, because earlier it was mentioning only for those larger facilities, but it says now any bed they have, 5 bed, 10 bed, how many other beds, they will have to maintain every day. They will have to display this monthly record in the website like any other. Okay, irrespective of the beds, the annual report has to be given by the 30th of June. Okay, this has to be initiated by March 2021. This was, for most of this, the deadline was 2 years, and because of the COVID, I think small changes might have happened. And however, there is a track that is happening on how it can be extended a little bit more to include everything. Okay, when it is bed less than 10, earlier there was not the need for treatment of the liquid waste was not strongly specified. Now it says it should have a discharge standard for the liquid waste, even if it is less than 10 beds. Okay, so also remember that when it is a laboratory or non-bedded facilities, it's a one-time authorization. You just take a permission from the Pollution Control Board only for a single time, and it is not for every time, like as you would have for the healthcare facility. Now, for the implementation of these biomedical waste standards, you will have to practice as per the updated rule, which means whatever is inclusive, 2016, amended 18 and 19, everything should be practiced by every facility since it's a rule. The common treatment facility within the 75 radius is there. It should follow you should tie up with the common treatment facility. If not, have a deep burial pit. Okay, pre-treat the waste, disinfect or autoclave, depending on whether you have liquid waste or the blood bags that you need to treat them. Need to convert all the chlorinated bags to non-chlorinated bags only, including blood bags. Blood bags are chlorinated plastic bags. Okay, so the cost of the non-chlorinated bags is slightly expensive, but now you will be getting, or you are already getting, non-chlorinated blood bags also. So such things also should be included into the list. Labeling and barcoding should be ensured at all times to see that you know what is generated, how much is generated, where is it generated, so you can track it back, and it is traceable also. It's important. Barcoding will help you track not just the healthcare facility, not just the common treatment facility, also the Pollution Control Board can do that. Okay, report accidents, document all the biomedical waste that is generated, upload it into the website monthly basis. Annual report 30th of June, it's a must. And ensure that that means you need to form a committee, have the meetings done, and have a program. Now, quickly into the last bit of this, and this has become a huge concern. This is an old picture that I've picked up, but I'm sure now it's much more. I think the entire space is filled with these biomedical waste or the PPE, because every human being in the country is now having a PPE to wear, and after a use, it's been discarded. So whether it is different types of PPE, whether it is a cloth or it's the 3-ply mask you have, or sometimes using the N95, or you have them and it is getting generated in large quantities and getting disposed. Now, too much is become a very difficult thing to handle across. This just to show you a statistics, because this is slightly old one. Of course, this is something in the month of June 2020, 2021. So you have the numbers saying which area generates. The reds are the ones which is generating more waste, and the yellow one is telling us how much of these waste are the COVID waste, because COVID waste is now identified to be separated out, and the generated COVID waste are segregated separately and then transported separately and treated separately, so we also get to know the number of quantities of waste. However, the state that is generating the waste still seems to be the same, but the documentation being fantastic in certain places. So that may be the reason. Some states like Kerala, they have excellent barcoding facilities much earlier. So their documentation of everything is pretty much well done to see how much is there. Then the app that was used for the COVID waste, once the facilities are open, when a COVID isolation ward or facilities for treating COVIDs are there and you register, you will the app need to be downloaded and you start to fill up the complaints to that filling up is not all great. So that is something is a concern again. Now, like I mentioned to you earlier, COVID, the vaccination with to preventing COVID, all of these are generating a lot of waste. But once we had some numbers of COVID patients, and the Central Pollution Control Board became very much active and started to initiate how to categorize the waste for COVID, how to handle. So they initiated this in March 19, 2020. So there were first revision, second revision, third revision, and fourth revisions of this, including different aspects of it, trying to look at quarantine, trying to look at treatment facilities, trying to looking at the safety of the sanitary workers in the level 3 document, and level 4 was trying to look at all those quarantined household people and facilities along with the others. So all of these were looked at. And this was the last final document of the fourth revision, revised central document by the Central Pollution Control Board for handling COVID waste. Let me tell you in simple words, it's pretty much the same, not much of a difference to what it would do. But only thing is, at the site, it would have a pedal operated bins, should have a double bag to that. And between the bags, sodium hypochlorite sprayed on, waste generated has to be labeled as COVID-19 waste. Documentation of these waste are separate. Transportation of this waste are separate. Staff or sanitary workers taking this waste have to be separate, and then stored separately and then treated separately as well. So this is the small little bit you can read regarding all of the waste generated in this particular document, which is given in much more in detail. There is not much any change to this after the last year's revision, right? In the household waste, that is the waste that we are generating or our families are generating at home, or our neighbors are generating at our near our surroundings. It is for these ways, it again gives, the Pollution Control Board gives a guidance on just snip cut them, put them into a paper bag. You allow it to be there in the bag for 3 days, becomes non-infectious, and then you throw them in the general waste itself, because you cannot have them putting them in specific bags in the household. However, if there is somebody who is isolated, quarantined at the houses, they say ask them to put them into yellow bags, okay, and then give away everything. But otherwise, for the routine the gloves and masks that we are using at home, it has to be disposed in this way, as the Central Pollution Control Board has guided us through. Just to quickly summarize, okay, this is under the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Forestry, Environment, Forestry, Climate Change, okay, which under which would come the Central Pollution Control Board, guides the State Pollution Control Board, and then you tie up with the Common Biomedical Waste Treatment Facility, which is a third party which takes the waste from the facility. The Central Pollution Control Board is a regulatory body which regulates and guides through the process. So we have the Biomedical Waste Rule 2016 with the amended 18 and 19 applicable to us. So they need to always adhere to the color coding. There should not be any change in the color, and it has to be non-chlorinated bags, because chlorinated bags cannot be burned, and red color bags cannot be burned at all, because the dye in the red and the chlorine in the bag, all of these, when you burn them, it releases a lot of toxic fumes and should not be allowed to be done that way at all. Blue and white are punch-proof containers, and they have to be, all bags need to be sealed, never above 3/4, have to have the biohazard or the symbol C on them when storing, and it has to be stored, segregated, transported, segregated, finally treated and disposed as according to the waste. Compliance to be ensured at every aspect of it, to having a facility, not having a facility, having a deep pit, burial pit that would be there, or the number of person, teaching, training, vaccination, hand washing facilities, PPE allowed and given to them, barcoding, weighing of the waste, everything has to be followed to the T, including the monitoring that you would do, and having a meeting to discuss and review whether you can reduce the waste in case if it's possible. Where all can you reduce the biomedical waste? Where all can you reuse, so that you don't have to dispose it immediately? Just reuse again and then dispose it. For example, if there is a slide which is used, okay, after it has been decontaminated very well, a good slide can be used for another something, where stain smear can be used for looking at a stool examination and then dispose. So you look at disposal of material review the material before you dispose them again. So you need to see whether there is a possibility of reusing them, and then also to see whether there can be recycled. Of course, recycled with appropriate measures of disinfectant, decontamination or sterilization process, so that it can be reused. So it has to be done in the way recommended by the rule itself. And we did look at the COVID waste disposal guidelines and also the issues associated with the COVID waste that has been generated in large quantities currently. However, we will have to handle this, and slowly we will have to come up with methodologies where we can still work on even when we are generating these waste. When the COVID pandemic settles, we'll still have some amount of waste being slightly higher than the usual for some period of time before it settles down. So at every point of time, the committees have to discuss and see where is the possibility of reducing these waste at the healthcare. So finally, proper biomedical waste management is not just a legal necessity. Please remember, the rule is legal. It's just not legal necessity, but it's also a very social responsibility. So we started with the bird which means almost triangulated with the mask, and here is another bird which is trying to help us clean up the environment with the PPE that we've thrown out all places. Right? Thank you very much. Thank you all for your patient hearing, and if there are any questions, I would be very happy to take. And thank you really very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was an excellent and wonderful session. Hope the knowledge gained out of this webinar will be of immense help to our junior doctors, especially for our NEET aspirants and those who are appearing for their professional exams, which is ongoing. Thanks a lot, ma'am, for your time despite your busy schedule. So we are coming to the end of the session. Let's take a few questions from the audience. Audience, please start typing the questions. In the meantime, while audience are typing the questions, I would like to play a 1-minute trailer of our upcoming international conference organized by UNESCO Chair in Bioethics in collaboration with us. Team Clarinet, please play the video. Thank you. We'll take a few questions. Actually, there are many questions, ma'am. We'll selectively take few questions due to time constraint. My first question is from Dr. Naveen Kumar. How to dispose expired blood bag with blood in it?
Okay, so you will have to autoclave it, and then dispose them in yellow bag. You are disposing them in the yellow bag. You autoclave and dispose it.
Okay, ma'am. From Dr. Bandana Mohan, what are the IV access devices and sharps used for administration of cytotoxic drugs disposed? Where are these disposed?
Yeah, so for the cytotoxic drugs, like I mentioned to you, all of these, you don't want them to be exposed to any of these cytotoxic drugs. So therefore, you have to bag them all together in a yellow bag, put a symbol C, document it, and hand it over to the manufacturer for disposal. But if it is with the sharp, it usually comes, even the tubings would come with the sharp. The sharp alone is put in the punch-proof container and handed over. All others, including the PPE used by the healthcare worker when preparing the cytotoxic drug dilutions, also need to be disposed into the same.
Okay. Question from Dr. Mangai Karsi. How to discard vacuuminous and discard the sample inside it?
Okay, vacuuminers need to be autoclaved. You never open the vacuuminer and dispose into chemical solutions. You always autoclave it. Again, autoclaving of decontaminated, whether it's a blood bag or for this. And I also saw a question of the molecular, whether it is a cartridge or a chip-based test for post-molecular assays. All of these need to be autoclaved at 121 degrees centigrade for a holding time of 60 minutes. Please remember it's 60 minutes and then it is disposed for further treatment. That's it.
Okay, ma'am. And what is the reason for not putting sodium chloride in white container according to 2018 guidelines?
Okay, so slowly we are phasing out of the use of chlorine or chlorinated products into the environment. So much use of sodium hypochlorite all over. And COVID again added more sodium hypochlorite because we recommended everywhere to use 1% sodium hypochlorite or alcohol. But however, this guideline was much earlier than that, where wanted to face the use of increased use of sodium hypochlorite when it is not really required. When you have a container which is tamper proof, okay, a puncture proof container which you're not going to open at all, then you don't need to decontaminate it for disposal. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Runa has asked, what is the disposal method for radiology department waste like the X-ray plates?
Okay, this would not come under the biomedical waste rule at all. The radiation hazardous material does not come under this. You have to hand over separately to the person's concerned for the radiological waste itself. So this does not come under the biomedical waste rule.
Okay, ma'am. Last question. Dr. Ananya Mitra has asked, is there any regulatory body who keeps a watch on the pricing part of biomedical waste disposal? During COVID period, rates have been increased, skyrocketed by the disposal agencies, and the hospitals are compelled to pay.
Yeah, so the regulatory bodies are the Pollution Control Board. So they are the ones who guide them. So if there would be a change, then there is a communication that's given from the Pollution Control Board to both the occupier as well as the operator, that is us as healthcare facilities, to the operator who's a third party. Both of them would get the communication. So there wouldn't be any issue with that. But in case if there is an increase, you can even complain. You can complain to the Pollution Control Board directly.
Okay.
Discarding of TrueNat can is in the there was another question whether if not autoclaving, can you use 1% sodium hypochlorite for the chips and cartridges? Yes, you can, but the best method is to decontaminate, because the guideline says that you can either do a chemical disinfection or autoclaving. Autoclaving is the best method to do. For the molecular methods, like you would see, the yellow bags go into 1% with the autoclaving only, and then for its final treatment, so you need to autoclave and dispose. It's in the yellow bag.
Okay, I mean, many participants are requesting for slides, ma'am. Is it possible?
Sure. Yeah, I'll mail it to you. Yes.
Okay. So participants can get the slides. We'll post it in our IMA Junior Doctors Network Facebook page and in our Telegram group. You can see the slides. Okay, ma'am. So there are many questions unanswered, but due to time constraint, we are closing now, ma'am. Now I request my mentor and IMA Junior Doctors Network National President, Dr. Shiv Joshi, sir, to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Venkatesh. And I would start with thanking Dr. Jayalakshmi ma'am. I think it was a very enriching session today. And biomedical waste management is one of the most important areas when it comes to whether it is a small clinic or a large hospital. Every doctor needs to understand biomedical waste. If we look at the statistics, we see that any doctor in a developing or a developed world is going to produce around 0.2 to 5 kgs of biomedical waste per patient per bed. And the magnitude of problem, if we look at the developing versus developed countries, the developed countries, they tend to have more biomedical waste compared to the developing countries. But the real problem in developing world is management of this waste. So I think though we have like a comparatively less amount of biomedical waste compared to the developed world, we actually struggle in adequate management of the biomedical waste. And I think that was wonderfully outlined by the by today's session by Dr. Jayalakshmi ma'am. And it was also very nice to see, ma'am, how well you you solved those intricacies or the subtle clarities that are required when there was one of the questions on radiological films, whether they can be, how they should be discarded. But then we often tend to, we do not actually know, or we are not able to discriminate those subtle things when it comes to the practical problems. So thank you, ma'am, for clarifying that. And I think it was really a wonderful session. I also thank Dr. Abul Hassan sir, who is also our chairman of IMA-JDN. I thank Dr. Venkatesh Karthikeyan, who has taken this initiative and has been consistently giving out some of the best webinars that we have had in the recent times. I also thank the team Clarinet for managing this session flawlessly. Moreover, I thank CAHO for this association with IMA-JDN. And I think it was a wonderful session where all of us could understand and learn something new. I also thank the attendees who gave their valuable time for attending this meeting and also participated very actively in the discussion. Thank you all for the opportunity. Thank you, Venkatesh.
Thank you. It was an
Thank you.
absolute pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. The participants are asking regarding the certificate. So the certificates, the recording of the session, and the PowerPoint presentation will be shared in our Facebook and Telegram groups named IMA Junior Doctors Network, IMA-JDN. All these things will be done within 1 week's time. So you can find it in these platforms. So once again, I would like to thank Dr. Jayalakshmi ma'am, Dr. Abul Hassan sir, Dr. Shiv sir, Dr. Vijay Agarwal sir, Dr. Lala Joseph man, and all our 500 plus participants for making this webinar a grand success. Thanks a lot, everyone. We are closing now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.